He who loses himself trying to save love ends up with neither. Friedrich Nietzsche. There are things in a man's life that can be overlooked, small slips that natural human coexistence requires us to ignore to maintain peace. An occasional mistake, a harsh word spoken in the visceral heat of an argument, or a moment of weakness where tiredness speaks louder than reason. However, there are dangerous frontiers, lines drawn not in the sand, but in masculine dignity itself, which, when crossed, silently assassinate something inside you that will never return. They are invisible limits, often ignored in the name of an idealized love, but which, once violated, emit a clear and deafening signal that the woman walking beside you no longer respects the man you fight daily to be. And you need to understand, with the coldness of a surgeon, that when respect abandons the relationship, love dies instantly. Even if her body still seems warm, even if she still recites sweet words that, deep down, no longer carry any soul. The first deadly sin, the one that must never be forgiven in any relational dynamic, is cunning disloyalty disguised as innocence or naivety. We are not speaking only of the physical act, of the carnal consummation of betrayal, but of the slow corrosion that precedes it. It is that subtle moment when she begins to create digital barriers, hiding messages with a quick screen movement, omitting conversations that should be trivial, keeping secrets and creating gray zones where trust, which is the oxygen of the couple, begins to dissolve amidst paranoid doubts. Moral betrayal precedes physical betrayal, and it occurs when she begins to feed the attention of another man, allowing external validation to fill her ego. Observe the micro-signals, the subtle flirtation, the smile that lasts a second too long for a stranger, the need to test her own power of attraction outside the relationship. By doing this, she is draining the vital energy that should be an exclusive temple for the two of you and diverting it to the vanity market. The man who pretends not to see this, who rationalizes these behaviors as just her way, is committing the greatest betrayal of all, the betrayal against himself and against his primordial instincts. Never forgive, under any circumstance, a woman who deliberately tests your value, who intentionally provokes you to verify if you feel jealousy, or who lies just to measure the length of the chain with which she believes she holds you. When she creates unnecessary dramas, manufacturing chaos where there should be peace, just to verify if she still possesses the remote control of your emotions, she is not demonstrating passion. She is exercising Machiavellian manipulation. This is a power game masked as romantic intensity. The man who yields to this type of dynamic, who reacts like a Pavlovian dog to every negative stimulus, gradually transforms into an emotional puppet, orbiting pathetically around her needs and narcissistic strategies, losing, day after day, his own masculine essence. Understand that the woman who truly respects the man by her side does not feel the need to test him, for she admires him. She trusts in the solidity of his presence and does not need to poke the lion to know that he still roars. If you perceive that you are living in a perpetual tribunal, being tested with every gesture, where your calm is interpreted as weakness and your kindness as submission, it is at this exact moment that the oldest and most vital masculine instinct must awaken: the capacity to turn your back and walk away. The man who remains where he is disrespected teaches the woman, through his passive behavior, that he is worthy of that disrespect. And once this lesson is assimilated by her, the dynamic crystallizes, and nothing will ever be as before. For no apology, no theatrical tear, and no empty promise has the power to restore lost authority. Another extremely serious error, frequently overlooked by needy men, is emotional falsification. The use of affection as a bargaining chip and tool of control. When a woman begins to instrumentalize love, she ceases to express what she feels and starts calculating what to say to obtain the desired reaction. She praises you when she needs a favor, but subtly humiliates you when she wants to reaffirm power in the relationship. One day you wake up and perceive the mental exhaustion of walking through a perpetual minefield, measuring every syllable, walking on eggshells, living in a state of hypervigilance to avoid the next explosion of mood or the next withdrawal of affection. This ceases to be a relationship to become a maximum security psychological prison. The most tragic part is that many men, conditioned by loneliness or low self-esteem, get used to this treatment, confusing the adrenaline of instability with the passion of love, coming to trust drama more than tranquility.
But always remember, true love is not a zero-sum game. It is a space of mutual expansion. A strong man does not forgive when the noblest sentiment is used as a weapon pointed at his head. For love is not begged for, it is not negotiated under threat, and it is not bought with submission. If she threatens to withdraw her own presence, saying she will leave if you do not obey, the only worthy response is to open the door. A woman who uses abandonment as emotional blackmail does not deserve a single second of your vital energy. For true love grows in the fertile ground of respect. And when that soil is contaminated by childish games, what blooms is only bitter resentment. Every man needs to engrave in his soul that respect is the oxygen of love, and without it, the relationship dies suffocated, taking you along into the abyss. Never forgive disrespect that comes disguised as excessive sincerity or joking. That phrase, spoken with a smile on the face, but loaded with poison, that comment that subtly diminishes you in front of friends or family, that veiled comparison with the success or appearance of another man, all these are calculated blows to the heart of your masculinity. Every time you let one of these blows pass without a firm correction, a part of your self-respect is erased. A man must not be a tyrant, but it is forbidden to be a fool. Being understanding does not mean being blind to malice, and being patient is not synonymous with being a submissive doormat. The woman who really loves wants to see her partner grow, expand his domains, and reach his maximum potential, not see him small and insecure. If she needs to humiliate you to feel powerful, understand that you are not sleeping with a partner, but with a rival who secretly competes with you. Never forgive the woman who cannot stand seeing you in a position of leadership, who needs to sabotage your moments of glory to feel she has a voice in the relationship. A functional relationship is an alliance of powers where both walk side by side, and not a gladiator fight where one tries to step on the other's neck to feel superior. There are men who forgive the unforgivable because they are hostages to the fear of loneliness. But the fear of being alone is the worst counselor a man can have, for it makes him vulnerable to any crumb of attention. A man who fears his own company will never be free. True masculine power is born when you internalize without a shadow of a doubt that it is infinitely better to sleep in peace in an empty bed than to wake up next to someone who drains your soul slowly, drop by drop. Understand that forgiveness without behavioral change is merely self-deception. If you forgive a woman who destroyed your trust and she continues acting the same way, you are not loving. You are practicing a pathetic submission disguised as hope. And excessive hope, when misdirected, kills respect. Every man who remains static in the place where he was disrespected is saying, without using words, "Do it again, for I do not have the courage to leave." And invariably, she will do it, because human nature is designed to test limits where there are no consequences. Never forgive a woman who mocks your pain. When you, in a moment of rare vulnerability, open your heart, and she responds with irony, sarcasm, or indifference. When you speak of something that hurts you, and she turns her back or minimizes your feelings, know that this is the death certificate of the emotional bond. No relationship survives when the pain of one becomes the entertainment or the boredom of the other. The woman who laughs at or ignores your suffering has ceased to love you a long time ago, even if her body still occupies the space next to you in bed. Many men confuse wounded pride with dignity. And many women confuse masculine empathy with weakness of character. When she realizes she can wound you deeply, and even so, you remain there, unshakable in your subservience, she comes to believe she holds absolute power over you. And, biologically, once the woman feels she completely dominates the man, respect evaporates, and sexual desire follows soon after. She starts managing you like a resource, controlling your reactions, offering crumbs of affection to keep you trapped in the web, and blaming you for all problems to rid herself of her own responsibility. It is a toxic cycle that destroys any sense of personal value.
A man must never forgive a woman who humiliates him, whether with sharp words, with disdainful attitudes, or with punitive silence. Humiliation is a slow-acting poison, the most dangerous in a relationship. It comes in homeopathic doses, a comparison here, a mocking laugh there, a public refusal over there. And when you finally realize the gravity of the situation, you have already lost the position of emotional leadership and become an accessory in her life. The woman who humiliates you, even if only once, no longer sees you as a man to be admired, but as a convenient option to be tolerated. The worst scenario is that, in many cases, the man tries to improve after the humiliation, trying to prove he is worthy, that he can be better, more understanding, more patient, in a desperate attempt to reconquer her validation. But this effort is useless and pathetic, because the problem does not lie in the quantity of what you offer, but in her inability to respect who you are. Respect is not born from excessive giving, but from the firmness of posture. Do not forgive the woman who lies repeatedly, for lying is the termite of the relationship structure. Even if they are small untruths, they destroy the fundamental foundation of shared reality. In the beginning, you try to justify, telling yourself she lied to avoid an unnecessary fight. But soon, you begin to doubt your own sanity and everything she says. When doubt installs itself, love transforms into police surveillance. The man starts living in a state of alert, reading non-verbal signals, interpreting tone of voice, trying to guess what is hidden between the lines. No one can love in peace, living like a private detective inside their own home. The woman who lies is telling you, loud and clear, that the truth of her life does not include you, that what she feels or does needs to be hidden because you are not worthy of knowing or dealing with reality. When this happens, the sacred bond breaks. No request for forgiveness has the power to rebuild a trust that was assassinated by the systematic repetition of lies. And the man needs to urgently stop confusing empathy with weakness. You can, yes, understand her traumatic past, the pains of childhood, the fear of being vulnerable. But nothing, absolutely nothing of that justifies the lack of character in the present. A wounded woman needs professional therapy, not a man who accepts being the punching bag for her unresolved traumas. If you try to heal that which she herself does not want to heal, you will inevitably end up sick as well.
Never forgive the woman who places you in the background, constantly and systemically. When you are always the last priority, the last to know the news, the last to be heard and considered, it is because you no longer appear on the list of things she respects or values. Love requires energetic reciprocity. You cannot invest all your emotional capital in someone who only gives you attention when it is convenient, when she has nothing better to do. The man who lives begging for time and affection transforms into a shadow, and shadows do not inspire desire, only pity and contempt. Another unforgivable error is emotional betrayal disguised as modern friendship. It is when she maintains close ties with ex-partners, friends who clearly have ulterior motives, or people with whom there was already an intimate exchange of energy. She will swear she is innocent, that you are insecure and controlling, that there is nothing wrong. But the messages exchanged at inopportune times, the hidden laughter, the confidences made outside the relationship show exactly the opposite. A man of value must never accept sharing his woman's emotional attention with another male. If she needs to seek outside the validation and connection she should build inside the relationship, she is no longer your partner. She is your silent and sabotaging rival. Never forgive when she begins to compare you openly with other men. So-and-so is more romantic. My ex did this better. My friend understands what I say. These phrases are blades that cut the fabric of mutual respect. Comparison kills enchantment instantly because it transforms love, which should be unique, into a market competition. And when a man accepts entering this dispute to prove his value, he has already lost before even starting. Love needs emotional exclusivity to survive and flourish. And finally, do not forgive prolonged indifference, that icy state where she stops looking into your eyes, where touch becomes mechanical and cold, where her body is present in the room, but her soul is miles away. This is the funeral prelude to the death of love. Do not accept crumbs of physical presence. A man should prefer the dignified silence of solitude to the empty presence of a woman who no longer vibrates on the same frequency as him. Forgiving these attitudes is like trying to resuscitate a corpse. It is a macabre and useless effort. Love needs strong roots made of truth, respect, admiration, and non-negotiable loyalty. When these elements die, the relationship becomes merely a social facade, and the man who remains in it is only postponing the inevitable, the total loss of himself. A mature man needs to understand that love is not, and never was, a reason to accept everything. True love does not require self-annihilation. When you start forgiving what destroys your inner peace, you no longer love the person. You have become attached to them. And attachment is an emotional prison disguised as deep affection. There is an abyssal difference between comprehending and accepting. Comprehending the flaws of others is human and noble. Accepting the unacceptable is a loss of dignity. The woman who plays with your feelings may not be a soap opera villain, but she is not innocent either. There are people who simply do not know how to love, and others who do not want to learn because they benefit from chaos. They live on basic instincts, on neediness, and on control. If you do not know how to position yourself as an unshakable rock, you will be just another step on the emotional ladder she uses to climb and feel alive. Therefore, the modern man needs to become brutally selective, not based on aesthetic appearance, but on the energy the woman emanates. There are stunning women who carry chaos inside them, hurricanes that destroy everything they touch. And there are others, perhaps more discreet, who exhale peace and build empires alongside their men. The fatal error of man is letting himself be led only by visual attraction and ignoring the strident signals of the soul. Every woman you choose to bring into your life is a seed. She will flourish inside you and bring abundance, or she will create poisonous roots and intoxicate your existence. The man must not forgive the woman who makes him doubt his own sanity and perception, the nefarious practice of gaslighting. When this happens, he loses his sense of direction, and a man without direction becomes a ship adrift in the open sea. Any wind takes him to the rocks. She accuses him, confuses him, reverses the blame, and you start to ask yourself if you are the problem, if you are crazy. This is emotional manipulation of the highest level. The more you try to justify yourself, the tighter she pulls the noose. Never forgive when love turns into a constant war zone, when every conversation ends in a fight, when every attempt at peace is sabotaged by her pride. The man does not need to win every argument. He needs the wisdom to recognize when dialogue is no longer possible. When a woman makes you feel that you are always wrong, that everything is your fault, that your energy is never enough, it is the definitive sign that the bond has rotted. There are men who naively believe that infinite patience cures everything. But patience without limit is complicity with one's own suffering. The wise man knows how to distinguish the moment to fight for the relationship and the moment to leave to save his own life. There are battles that are not won with force or arguments, but with total absence. Sometimes, absolute silence is the loudest and most powerful scream a man can give. Do not forgive the woman who makes you feel small for being who you are, who criticizes your ambition, who mocks your grandiose dreams, who says you think too high and should be more realistic. True love inspires growth and expansion. When she tries to diminish your shine, it is because, deep down, she fears what you might become without her, or fears that you grow too much and she is left behind. The man who yields to this mediocrity dies on the inside. A man must protect his energy and his purposes as a king protects his throne and his borders. Not every woman deserves access to your sacred inner world. The masculine principle is force, purpose, direction, and stability. When that energy is drained by constant drama, unfounded jealousies, pathological insecurity, and emotional games, the man loses his natural power of action in the world. It is not for nothing that so many men today feel exhausted, confused, and without direction. They love without discernment, giving pearls to those who cannot distinguish jewels from stones. A crucial moment arrives when you need to look in the mirror and ask, what am I protecting here? Genuine love or my terrible fear of losing and being alone? When the answer is fear, it is no longer love, it is dependency. Fear makes a man accept the unacceptable, makes a man return to the fire, thinking he will find warmth, when what awaits him is only more burning. A man must not forgive the woman who manipulates him emotionally to feel in control, who uses the silent treatment to punish him as if he were a child, who uses neediness to trap him, or guilt to make him yield to her will. This is the most subtle and perverse form of domination. She does not scream. She exhausts him psychologically. She does not bind him with physical chains, but wraps him in a mental fog until you no longer know who you are. When love turns into exhaustion, something precious has been lost. You, yourself, your voice, your clarity, your vital strength. The man who gives too much of himself, who annuls himself to please, loses the shine in his eyes, the firmness of his posture, the calm in his breathing. And no woman, in her deepest biology, desires an erased and submissive man. The paradox is cruel, but real. The more you annul yourself to please and avoid conflicts, the less she desires you sexually and romantically. And the less she desires you, the more you strive in panic to reconquer what has already died. True power lies not in having the capacity to forgive everything like a saint, but in having the discernment to know what must never be forgiven by a man of value. Love is not an infinite and unconditional resource. It depends on oxygen, space, truth, and reciprocity. And there are moments in life when a man needs to do what he fears most: close the door definitively. Not out of revenge, not out of hatred, but out of profound respect for himself. When you say enough, something changes in your physiology. The mind goes silent, the heart reorganizes, and the soul returns to breathing freely. It is in this moment of rupture that the man returns to being the king of his own destiny and no longer a subject of another's love. Every man, at some point in his journey, needs to pass through the purification of loss. It is there, when love breaks and delusions fall, that he discovers if he is a man who depends or a man who chooses. The difference is simple, but defines entire destinies. The dependent one bows and crawls so as not to lose the other. The one who chooses stands up and walks so as not to lose himself. It is in this sacred instant that true masculinity is reborn, not in brute force, but in the stoic capacity to walk away when the soul asks for respect. The most common mistake men make is believing that remaining, enduring, and suffering is a sign of strength and courage. Sometimes the bravest man is the one who leaves in silence, without slamming the door, simply disappearing from the life of someone who did not know how to value him. Continuing in a relationship where there is no longer reciprocity is insisting on living in a house with cracked foundations. The longer you stay, the greater the risk of the roof collapsing on your head. A man must never forgive the woman who plays with his time, for time is the most valuable and irrecoverable asset he possesses. When a woman wastes your time with indecisions, comings and goings, empty promises, and the cyclical repetition of the same mistakes, she is demonstrating the most absolute disrespect for your life. The man who values himself understands that love only makes sense when there is direction and joint construction. Without direction, love turns into a whirlpool that sucks energy and leads nowhere. The woman who truly loves you wants to walk by your side, build a legacy, and not test your patience indefinitely. When she begins to trap you in vicious cycles, promising change but repeating toxic behaviors, it is because she has already learned through your tolerance that you forgive everything. And when forgiveness becomes routine, it loses all its value and significance. Forgiveness should be the rare bridge that rebuilds the bond after an honest mistake, not the dirty rug that covers the hole of lack of character. When a man forgives without demanding real transformation, he teaches that his boundaries are illusory, and the woman loses the notion of the limit, not necessarily out of intrinsic malice, but because human instinct always settles where it finds no resistance or consequence. Never forgive when love requires you to betray yourself. When she asks you to change that which defines you, to abandon your fundamental values, your life goals, your loyal friends, your masculine essence.
True love does not ask for the renunciation of identity. It asks only for the maturity to grow together. A woman who tries to mold the man in her image and likeness does not want a partner. She wants a reflection, an accessory. And the man who accepts becoming a reflection ceases to emit his own light. He fades, becomes confused, gets lost, and the relationship, instead of being an engine of expansion, becomes an emotional prison adorned with cheap romance. Therefore, the man needs to maintain his integrity as an impenetrable shield. It is this that protects him from the small daily deaths that happen when he gives up pieces of himself to be accepted. Understand a biological truth. No woman who really loves a man will want to see him small, weak, and domesticated. The right woman, the high-value woman, feels safe and excited beside a man who is strong, stable, decisive, and who knows how to say no. In contrast, the immature and insecure woman feels threatened by this same strength and tries unconsciously to neutralize it through tests and dramas. She provokes, destabilizes, and tests limits just to feel she still has control over the beast. And it is at this point that many men fall, believing that if they love more, if they are nicer, she will stop. But love does not cure manipulation. What cures manipulation is a rigid limit.
Do not forgive when she crosses these limits and makes the relationship a boxing ring. When discussions cross the barrier of civilized respect and enter the territory of verbal cruelty. When the exchange of ideas turns into an ego dispute, when words are used as daggers and not as bridges of understanding. A woman who wounds you with full consciousness, who strikes exactly where she knows it hurts, has already given up on loving and started trying to defeat you. And love does not survive on battlefields. The man who remains in this type of relationship exhausts himself, loses his appetite for life, disconnects from his mission, from his projects, and from himself, coming to live in a state of constant alert, merely trying to avoid the next crisis. This is not love. It is emotional survival in a war zone. And what the man needs to learn is that life was made to be lived with fullness, not just tolerated with resignation. Mature love is simple, light, and fluid. It does not scream, it does not threaten, it does not demand proof all the time. It grows in tranquil presence, flourishes in mutual respect, and matures in comfortable silence. All the rest is emotional addiction and pathological dependency. And addiction is not forgiven. Addiction is treated with abstinence. When the man learns this, he changes levels. He stops trying to cure wounded women using his own blood as medicine. He understands that every human being needs to resolve their own chaos before daring to share life with someone. And he perceives, finally, that love without peace is just attachment disguised as destiny. Never forgive the woman who destroys your peace, because mental peace is the most valuable asset a man possesses. Without it, he does not think clearly, does not create, does not lead, does not prosper. Peace is the foundation that sustains focus, wisdom, and emotional dominion. When she leaves, carried by dramas and conflicts, the man loses contact with his source of strength. No matter how much she says she loves him, if her presence steals his balance, that love costs too much. It costs the price of his soul. Sometimes forgiveness is a noble act of elevated spirits. Other times, it is pure cowardice of weak men. The secret of life lies in discerning the difference. Because a man without discernment forgives what destroys him and walks away from what builds him. And when he realizes this, it is often too late, and years of life have been thrown away. But a moment arrives when the man awakens from this trance. Sometimes it is after a brutal betrayal. Sometimes after years of accumulated silence. Sometimes after a last argument where he simply falls silent, not out of fear, but out of a deep existential weariness. And in that silence, he understands everything. He understands that love should not hurt in this way, that respect should not be begged for on one's knees, that peace is not negotiable. He understands finally that his dignity is more precious than any effective bond. It is at this inflection point that the man who loved too much finally opens his eyes. And what he sees is not hatred, nor rancor. It is a crystalline clarity. He perceives that many of the wounds he carries came from having tried to fix what did not want to be healed, from having insisted on someone who was only there to learn her own value through his pain. This is the hardest lesson a man can live, but also the most liberating. Not every love is meant to last a lifetime, but every love serves to teach something about ourselves. The man who awakens does not seek revenge. He seeks distance. He does not need to prove anything to anyone. His absence is his definitive answer. His silence is his overwhelming victory. When a woman who wounded him realizes that he no longer feels anger, only a cold and distant indifference, she understands what she really lost. Not just a man, but a presence. And an authentic masculine presence is something that is not easily replaced. The man who learns not to forgive the unforgivable does not become a cold and bitter person. He becomes free. Because only freedom returns genuine masculinity, that which does not depend on external approval. He returns to taking care of the body, nourishing the mind, elevating the soul. He returns to thinking of himself as someone who deserves the best that life has to offer. And when a man returns to respecting and loving himself, the world and women return to respecting him. Never forgive the woman who tries to erase your purpose, because purpose is what differentiates the lost man from the man of inestimable value. When she tries to distance you from your plans, distract you from goals, divert you from the path you traced, she is not only interfering in the relationship, she is interfering in your destiny. True love propels you upward, never sideways or downward. If she does not inspire you to be better, she inevitably prevents you from being more. Do not forgive when she tries to control your fundamental freedom. Love is not possession, it is mutual trust. And the man who lives being watched, questioned, charged for every step, lives in an emotional prison of minimum security. The woman who loves him needs to trust his integrity and his leadership. If she does not trust, nothing else matters. The relationship is a house of cards. Constant distrust is a poison that corrodes everything it touches. A man must learn once and for all that it is not his function to save anyone. You are not your woman's therapist. You are not the redeemer of the pains another man caused in her past. You are the guardian of your own peace and your future. Love is only beautiful and functional when two whole people meet to overflow. When one of the two comes broken and the other tries to glue the pieces, the relationship turns into a hospital, and no one heals living inside the pain of the other. Therefore, learn to leave without guilt when the line is crossed. Leaving is not giving up. Leaving is a supreme act of self-respect. When you decide to walk away from where you are not valued, you are saying to the universe, I deserve something that does not destroy me. And the universe responds. It returns the calm, the focus, the lost lucidity. Gradually, the weight of the past disappears, and what remains is the wisdom acquired in the battle. The man who does not forgive the unforgivable starts to see love with other eyes, eyes of one who sees reality and not fantasy. He understands that love is not something that completes him, for he is already complete, but something that adds. He no longer seeks women to fill an existential void, because that void was filled with purpose and self-love. He seeks someone who walks alongside in the same step, not someone who needs to be dragged. And that is where the power returns, because true masculine power is not in dominating the woman, but in dominating oneself. It is in having absolute control over one's own emotions, in not reacting by impulse, in not begging for attention, in not losing one's head in the face of cheap provocation. The man who dominates his emotions is unbreakable. He does not despair. He does not take revenge. He does not beg. He merely walks away, and his silence echoes like thunder. Never forgive what steals your soul. No matter how much you loved, how much you promised, how much you dreamed, the soul is what keeps you alive and connected to the divine. Without it, nothing is worth it. Love can return, money can be recovered, life can change, but the soul, once mortally wounded, takes an eternity to heal. Protect it as the most sacred good you possess. And when the world tries to make you believe that forgiveness is always the correct answer, remember, forgiveness is wisdom when it frees you from the weight, but it is weakness when it imprisons you in the cycle of abuse. Sometimes, not forgiving and walking away is the purest act of self-love that exists. The man who understands this does not become bitter. He becomes serene. He learns to choose with calm, to love with consciousness, and to leave with dignity. He no longer lives to prove anything to anyone, but to exist in peace with himself. And it is in this unshakable peace that true love will one day find him, not to destroy him, but to accompany him on the journey. Because in the end of everything, the man who learned what he must never forgive also learned the most important lesson of all, what he must never lose: himself.